Imagine driving alone at night, the road ahead swallowed by fog, the trees closing in like silent witnesses. You think it's just another journey, until the shadows start to move and legends come alive. Tonight, Kevin's peaceful ride turns into a chilling tale of mystery, fear, and a question that could cost him everything. Do you find me beautiful? Stay with us as we dive into a story you won't soon forget.
There was peace and quiet on the first part of the trip. Kevin was riding his motorcycle through small, pretty places all over the Midwest. At every stop, we met friendly locals who were eager to talk about their lives, customs, and funny stories. Farmers markets were full of fresh, home-baked goods and ripe fruits and vegetables. The bright colors and welcoming smells made him appreciate the unique fabric of American life even more. But as night fell, he started to feel uneasy. As the night went on, the roads got narrower, there were fewer streetlights, and the scenery got darker. Kevin chose to go off the main highway in search of a quieter path that might provide a peaceful environment for his creative thoughts. He thought of cute barns, wide open field, and maybe an idea for his next picture. Instead, the trees squished together around him, making a creepy dome of branches that blocked out the last bits of daylight. Kevin felt a strange chill as he drove deeper into the thick woods. It wasn't the cool air of the night that bothered him. It was something more vague, a strange sense of familiarity. He knew he hadn't been here before, but it felt like he had. He felt like he was seeing things again, which made him even more uneasy. He kept going anyway, eager to get away from the shadows. A small sign for a gas station appeared in front of him, barely lit by his headlight. Kevin pulled into the lonely station, which looked like it had been there for a long time. It was very quiet when he walked outside. The night was unusually still. Inside, the assistant was an older man with a weathered face that made it hard to read. Kevin bought some snacks and drinks, but as he paid for them, he couldn't help but ask, "What's the deal with this road?" He paused, and his eyes got narrow. "You shouldn't stay here past dark," he said in a voice as dark as the night. Kevin raised an eyebrow. He was interested, but not scared. "Have you ever heard of the story of the slit-mouthed woman?" the worker asked in a voice that was almost whisper. Kevin shook his head and leaned in as the man began to tell a scary story about a ghost that was out to get him. People said she walked alone on lonely roads at night with a mask over her face. People she met on the road would only be asked one question: "Am I beautiful?" It depended on what the visitor said. A yes answer led to a second question, which showed her scarred face, and often death. A simple no made her very angry right away. The man told them that the only way out was to keep going and never stop. Kevin laughed uncomfortably and brushed off the story as a made-up local myth. After thanking the worker, he went back to his car. The engine roared to life, and he sped back onto the road, hoping to get out of the creepy mood. The trees, on the other hand, had other ideas. A thick fog came down at a frightening rate, covering the road in front of them. Kevin tightened his grip on the wheel, and his heart rate went up. The headlights could barely be seen through the white haze, and there was a heavy silence that seemed to cover everything. It got so quiet that only his heartbeat and the odd creak of the car could be heard. The radio's soothing hum turned into static, and then nothing. Suddenly, Kevin saw a figure at the side of the road through the fog. It was a woman who was standing still. There was a light breeze, and her dark coat and long hair moved with it. A medical mask hid her face. Kevin slowed down and rolled down his window, even though his body told him to keep going. He asked, "Are you okay?" But his voice was weak because it was late at night. The woman slowly turned her head, and her eyes were sparkling with an expression that couldn't be read. She said in a soft voice, "I've lost my way. It's my goal to get home." Kevin thought about what the old man had said and waited. He was getting more and more uncomfortable, but he couldn't leave her. After a short pause, she slid into the passenger seat after he opened the door. She said her name was Helena. Kevin felt strangely drawn to her because her voice had a warm quality to it. She talked about history, legends, and the strange pull of old stories as they drove. Even though she made Kevin feel uneasy at first, he started to enjoy being with her. Her words showed that she was very wise, and she looked a lot younger than she was. As they drove, time went by in a strange way. As the fog got thicker, Kevin's attention was focused on the few feet of road that his headlights could show. Over time, the car started to feel tense. Helena's warmth had turned into a heavy sadness. She began to talk about beauty, pain, and the hidden problems people have. Kevin felt something from what she said, but it also made him feel even worse. Helena asked, "Do you believe in legends?" Her voice broke the silence. Kevin hesitated, then replied, "I think, sometimes, they tell us more about ourselves than we realize." Helena nodded slowly, her gaze distant, as if she could see through the fog ahead. "Legends are often based on truth," she murmured. "Sometimes they're more about the hurts we all have than the scary things we fear." "What about you? Do you believe in legends? Have you ever heard a story so haunting or mysterious that it stayed with you? Let me know in the comment. I'd love to hear about the legends or strange experiences that made you question what's real." The weight of her words hung in the air. Kevin couldn't shake the feeling that she was talking more about herself than the legend. He glanced at her briefly, noticing for the first time the faint scar along her chin, barely visible above her mask. "Why are you really on this road?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. After a long pause, she replied, "People get lost sometime." Her voice carried a sadness that hit Kevin in the chest. "And sometimes, they just want someone to see them, to really see them." The fog outside got too thick for him to speak before he could answer. Kevin slammed on the brakes when the car shook. A shadow appeared in front of them. It was tall, intimidating, and clearly human. She stood still, her eyes wide with fear. She said in a whisper, "Here." The woman with a slit mouth. Kevin's heart was racing as the shadow moved slowly and deliberately toward him. When there was quiet, a low, scary voice asked, "Do you find me beautiful?" He felt like he had to run, drive, and get away. He had to leave Helena, though. It took all of his bravery to keep his voice steady and say, "Beauty isn't about what can be seen. It's about what's inside." The figure stopped, and there was a change in the stress in the air. Helena got out of the car, shaking but determined. "We all have scars," she said, even though she was scared. "But our pain doesn't make us who we are. We are beautiful because we keep going even when things get hard." The shadow paused, and its anger turned into something that looked like sadness. It slowly disappeared into the fog, leaving behind nothing but quiet. It was getting lighter as Kevin and Helena stood there in the thick fog. The road ahead was clear, and the stars could be seen for the first time that night through the tree. They got back into the car without saying a word. As they drove, the weight of what had happened remained, but so did a new understanding. Kevin discovered that everyone felt pain, but everyone was strong enough to get through it. The trip went on for a long time, but he was now ready for whatever came next. Kevin held on tight to the steering wheel. The stress still felt like a second skin around his finger. Helena sat quietly next to him and looked ahead at the road. Her eyes were fixed on something far away, like she was seeing past the concrete and the trees and into a place only she could see. There were a lot of unspoken words in the air between them, but there was also a silent comfort, a sense that, despite the fear they had just been through, they felt united in each other's company. As the road went on, it wound through a thick forest that now seemed less scary and more peaceful. Kevin slowly let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. He looked quickly at Helena and asked, "Are you okay?" She said nothing but nodded. Her hands were joined together tightly in her lap, and her fingers were shaking a little. Kevin didn't say anything else. He thought she needed some space to think about what had happened. To be honest, so did he. He kept thinking about what happened that night, like pieces of a dream that didn't fit together. It all seemed strange, the shadowy figure, the scary question, Helena's brave resistance. Still, Kevin couldn't get rid of the feeling that what they had seen wasn't just a sign of fear. Being put to the test showed them things about themselves that neither of them was ready to face. The car's headlights shone on a sign up ahead that said there was a small diner about a mile away. When Kevin thought about food, his stomach grumbled. The excitement of the night had used up all of his energy. He broke the quiet with, "Let's stop for a while. We both need a break." Helena didn't say anything. When they pulled into the dirt parking lot of the diner, Kevin noticed how the cold, empty forest stood in contrast to the warm glow of the sign, which was just a simple open. A single waitress was wiping down tables, and an older guy was drinking coffee in the far corner. The diner was mostly empty inside. The two of them slid into a seat next to the window. The waitress walked up to him with a tired smile that was both polite and real. "Hard night?" she asked, putting her pen on a paper. "You could say that," Kevin said with a half smile as he placed his order for coffee and a pie. Helena only wanted tea. After the waitress left, they sat there in quiet for a while. The only sounds were the high-pitched hum of the jukebox and the clinking of dishes. She finally spoke, and her voice was soft but steady. "Do you believe it's over?" Kevin put down his coffee and thought about what she said. "What do you mean?" "Happiness. It was something we saw back there." She was not sure what to do, and her eyes were looking at him to feel better. "Are you sure it's gone?" He planned to say yes because he thought it would make her feel better. He couldn't lie though. He said, "I don't know. But I feel like it wasn't really about her leaving. It could have been about us facing her." She thought about what he said while her lips were pressed together in a thin line. "Facing her," she said over and over, almost to herself. Her eyes kept going to the window, where a dark, endless forest could be seen. Perhaps. Kevin took slow, deep breaths of his coffee, letting the warmth fill him up. He thought about what Helena had said earlier about how people can get lost in their own minds as well as on the road. He felt something when she spoke, but he hadn't had time to think about why. As he sat across from her, he realized that he saw a part of himself in her. It was the part that had been looking for answers and trying to make sense of his scars. Kevin began, "You said something back there." His voice was shaky. "About people who need to be seen. About scars." He stopped for a moment, not sure if he should go on. "I feel like I've been lost too." Helena turned her attention to him and her eyes got soft. "What do you mean?" Kevin took a big breath. "I left my hometown a few months ago to look for something. I have no idea what it is. I thought that driving far enough might help me figure out who I am and give me a change of scenery. I've been running, though, from my own mistakes, my regrets, and myself." He looked at his hand. "And tonight I learned that you can't run away from what's inside you." Helena was quiet for a moment and didn't touch her tea. She spoke with a voice that showed she understood. She said, "I know how that feels. Like you're after something you can't describe. We hope that the answers will come if you just keep going." She stopped and looked away again. "But sometimes we need to look in places we're afraid to reach." Kevin nodded, and her words hit him hard. When the server brought their food back, they ate in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The pie was sweet and the coffee was warm, but Kevin didn't feel light in his chest because of the food. The thought that he wasn't so alone for the first time in a long time did it. Following their meal, Kevin took a quick look at Helena. "What about you?" he asked in a soft voice. "Where are you going?" She made a small, mysterious smile with her lips. "Home," was all she said. "Well, that's what I hope to find anyway." Kevin wanted to ask her more, but her face told him it wasn't the right time. He paid the bill instead, and they went back to the car. The air at night was cool and had a faint smell of earth and pine. There was no more fog, and the sky was full of stars. As they drove on, the moonlight lit up the road in front of them. Helena leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes as she finally gave up from being tired. Kevin kept his eyes on the road, but his mind wandered. He didn't know what was going to happen, but he wasn't scared of the journey for the first time in a long time. The first signs of dawn started to show up somewhere far away. As the car took them further, Kevin couldn't help but feel that they had both found a spark of light in the darkness. Legends often leave us questioning what's real and what isn't, but Kevin's encounter was just one of many. What if there's a creature lurking in the woods near your town, waiting for its next victim? Don't miss the next story that might make you rethink stepping outside at night. Click to watch now.